So we have a period now. If anyone has any questions or anything they'd like to discuss, please feel free.
Quite some time ago, I read somewhere, and I can't remember where, that the Buddha was asked what was life. And according to this thing that I read, he answered that it was energy in motion. And I was wondering whether in your reading of the scriptures you came across anything like this, and if so, where would one find it? In what the scripture, and in what connection, in what that the question was asked. I just thought it was very interesting at the time.
Life is motion, energy.
Energy in motion.
Energy in motion.
Which is very physics, But apparently that was the answer that he gave.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that at all. It doesn't sound much like the Buddha in the Pali Canon, actually. If the Buddha was in talking about the physical world, then the Buddha would talk in terms of what we call the elements, the 6 elements of earth, water, fire, air, space, and consciousness. So earth meaning the element of solidity, and water, fluidity, and fire element is heat or absence of heat, and the air element, movement and vibration, space and consciousness. And so the physical body is being composed of that, and then the world outside of us is composed of that. So yeah, I'm not familiar. This is one of the something I touched on right at the beginning of the talk. In that the word Buddha is used in different ways and in different places, and some of the Mahayana suttas or sutras, for instance, which I understand were composed quite some time after the Buddha passed away. But the Mahayana teachers will tell you that these were the teachings that were too profound for the people at the time of the Buddha to understand. So the Buddha gave them to the Devas and said, just look after these really profound teachings until some really smart people are born, and then you can pass them on. So, all those teachings are supposed to be given by the Buddha, which I have some doubts about. And then, as I say, in those traditions in which the word Buddha really means an enlightened being, then anyone who's considered enlightened is like considered to be representative of words of the Buddha. Also, sometimes people are very loose in their translation and wanting to make something applicable to people in the present day, try sort of upgrade it a bit, and you see it's interesting, like in the late 19th century, when there was a revival of Buddhism in Sri Lanka, and it was led actually by the Theosophists and Colonel Alcott and people like this. But the Sri Lankan Buddhists were trying to define themselves in opposition to the Christian groups. And so they would try to stress all the ways in which they were not like Christians, and Buddhism's not like Christianity. So you get this we call scientific Buddhism, sort of super rational kind of Buddhism. And then another period, you've got this, people feel kind of pressed by science. I want to say, like, Buddhism's not like Christianity, all these Buddhism's scientific, Buddhism's a science, and so things like the Buddha said this and the Buddha said that, and Albert Einstein said this and Albert Einstein said that. So I think it's something that happens in every generation. People who feel kind of insecure about the tradition, trying to give it some kind of validity or legitimacy by explaining it in terms of the current intellectual orthodoxy that people have faith in.
I've been doing some thinking about theism, atheism and non-theism. Some Buddhist scholars that I've heard of regard it as an atheistic religion, and others non-theistic. In other words, it doesn't really matter. It might be possible to know God, but finally it doesn't really matter. Can you just give us a few of your thoughts on that topic? Thank you.
It seems to me that I'm not sure I really know what the word God means. It's sort of God-based, isn't it? And colleague Ajahn Brahmangso, he used to go. He goes and visits a Christian monastery in Western Australia, and is very friendly with the monks there. And he told me once he just asked all the monks in the monastery, what exactly do you mean by God? And everyone had a different answer. Even like full-time monastics, and it seems so. When people ask me all the time to compare Buddhism and Christianity as if these were these two kind of monolithic entities that you can compare in that way. So it seems to me that there are so many different understandings of what God means. If we take the kind of fundamentalist idea of a creator God, and is the God of the Old Testament who sends down plagues and punishes people and does all that kind of stuff, and Buddhism can't really relate to that. But then if you read some of the great mystics, Christian mystics, then yes, you can see ways in which at least they could be compatible. Whether it's St. Augustine or St. John de Croix, all these the great sort of mystical figures of Christianity, and their idea of what the Godhead means is I don't want to say it's exactly the same, but it's compatible, comparable. But then I guess the next question will be, well, to what extent would their understanding of God be acceptable to the Christian Church? Often the people that, as Buddhists, you like the most are the ones that were heretics and sort of kicked out. So yes, I've since a child I've always just had this basic faith that there's no such thing as God. It just didn't seem, the whole kind of idea to me just seemed kind of weird, and it just didn't kind of fit into my experience. It's like if you were, say, walking in, I had this thought the other day for some reason, it's like if you imagine walking through the Great Canyon, the Grand Canyon in America, and then you just came across this kind of big plastic edifice. You've never seen that before, but somebody tells you this is not part of the Grand Canyon. This is something weird and grafted on. Some put a modern artist has stuck it there or something. And I always thought the idea of God just doesn't relate to my experience of the world I live in, and this is my personal kind of feeling about it. So in terms of general conceptions of a creator God, and a God who has some kind of personal influence on life, I've never. I wonder about this. If you think that there's a God who has some kind of influence on your life, then I wonder, how do you make a decision? How to put forth effort, what kind of effort you put forth. For instance, if you think you're going to pass exams or not, one part of this is your revision and one part is God. Okay. well, what's the ratio there? How much time should you spend at the books, and how much time should you spend praying? I mean, I'm going to be facetious. Do you know what I mean? So does every single thing happen because of God, or just some things? If some things happen because of God and some things don't, where do you draw the line? That breeze that's just coming through there, and those particular leaves that are moving in the breeze there, is that because of God, or because of the wind? If it's because of the wind, then that means that there are certainly some things in the world which have nothing to do with God. So what are the things that are to do with God, and what are the things that are not to do with? These are kind of questions that I might be quite naive, and a sort of theologian would laugh at me, but that's the kind of thing that I've never been able to work out. I don't know if anybody else has any sort of ideas about these things. But so for me, it's actually basic to being a Buddhist, that you have this faith in action and volition, and that you make your life through how you act, how you speak, how you use your mind, and that's something you have to take responsibility for. So for that reason, the existence or not of God kind of doesn't even come up. I mean, even if the clouds were to open this point, this big man with a beard, sort of pointed, he said, "You've got it all wrong." I said, "No, I haven't." I still wouldn't believe it. And I think it was a hologram or something. Yeah.
I'm not sure I understood the definition of truth, because through the readings I've done, the word Dhamma is translated in truth, sometimes by truth in English. So in the 10 paramis you detailed for us before, I'm not sure I understood that one. Compared to the...
Sorry?
The parami, is that right? The parami.
Yeah.
The truth. I'm not sure I understood that.
Yeah, truth as a parami is more on the sort of the conventional level of having a sense of loyalty and commitment to the truth as you see it, or the truth as you understand it. Or another point I made on a previous talk, the Buddha talked about caring for the truth. And caring for the truth is you don't claim to know the truth about things that you merely have faith in. So the Buddha says it's quite possible to believe in things that don't actually exist, and to have very strong conviction in something which afterwards turns out to be not so. For that reason, you shouldn't ever claim that a very strong faith is knowledge of the truth. Faith is faith, and knowing is knowing, that these are two different things. So we can talk about the truth as we know it, but it's more just like on a basic level of not lying, to the people around you. And I think many people overlook, and it is quite humbling, the extent to which we do lie. We say, "No, I don't tell lies," but you start off from that position. I don't tell lies. Well, that doesn't really count. And this doesn't really count. Why doesn't it really count? Because I don't tell lies. That's why I'm not somebody who tells lies. But apart from all the white lies, if you take that as a real sort of spiritual practice, not to tell lies under any circumstances. And as I say, that's not meaning you have to sort of blurt out everything. You think that woman's got a horrible dress on today. You have to tell her, because otherwise it's being dishonest. But make an effort. Then it's another one of these practices that illumines all kinds of stuff that's going on in your mind. Because why do you lie? Because you're embarrassed. You want somebody to like you. You're afraid that maybe they won't like you so much if they know the truth about that. Or you just can't be bothered. It's just too much to go into. And you see all these kinds of habitual ways the mind works become conscious, because you have like a standard that you're holding it up to. So Yeah, you see, Dhamma is an incredibly difficult word, and there are many different ways of explaining that word. There's sort of like 3 levels of Dhamma. Okay, so you have what we call Pariyatti, Patipat, Pativet. Pariyatti means like the theory, the teachings, and then Patipat means the practice of the teachings, and then Pativet means the realization, the penetration of the teachings. That's one way of talking about Dhamma. But the word in English we sometimes use like a capital D and a small d, because the word Dhamma as a small d just means phenomena. So in the chanting you have like Sabbhe Dhamma Anatta, means all Dhammas are Anatta. That means every single phenomena is without an abiding, independent essence to it. So in that case, Dhamma doesn't refer to the Buddha's teachings as such, but just to phenomena in general. But the reason why the same word is used is because the Dhamma is an exposition of the way things are, of the way Dhammas are. So big Dhamma with a capital D tells you the way that small Dhammas are, as it were. So things all go together, but it's sometimes these things can seem very sort of academic, but the reason why it is worthwhile studying them a bit is because it's so easy to misunderstand when you read Buddhist books, and they use these terms in different ways, and it's easy to get confused.
Maybe to study, would you recommend any book for starting this studying?
For study, I think the best overall presentation of Buddhist teachings, both the sort of the history and the teachings and the different schools, and not so long that it's kind of intimidating, but not too short, is a book. So I can't remember what it's called, but it's just one of these basic, like Buddhism or but the author is someone called Rupert Gethin, Gethin, and he's a professor in university in England, and he's a very good writer, and I think he's very clear. He's also very impartial in talking about the different schools of Buddhism, and I think he has a good understanding of teachings. So for a kind of overview, I mean the traditional one that most people would recommend is What the Buddha Taught by Walpola Rahula, but I think that's a bit kind of outdated now, and I prefer this book by Rupert Gethin.
Talking a little bit about God, I think it seems to me that God, or the concept of God, has become a receptacle for all of the mysteries of life and its contradictions, all of the things that people don't understand, why they have to suffer, why they're here, even. And in Buddhism, often, when we pay our respects and we prostrate and we bow and we make merit and we do these different things, to my thinking, and I'm hoping you'll clarify my thinking, that is a kind of a practice that's as much outward as it is inward. In other words, there doesn't make that separation that you had spoken of between a separate entity, God, to whom you might or might not be connected, and the world that we live in. So I'm wondering when we do these things, in Buddhism and according to what Buddha taught, what do they mean? Who are we doing them toward or to?
Yeah.
If anyone.
Yeah, there's a number of different points there. Say that, the whole relationship between the inner and the outer world is one that I think as Buddhists and meditators we're interested in understanding. So the Buddhist teaching is that the Dhamma Vinaya, this was the original way that the Buddhism was referred to. Buddhism is kind of like a much later term. So Dhamma is particularly concerned with the inner development, and Vinaya means the way in which you create conditions which are most conducive to the practice of Dhamma. So the logical conclusion or the ideal of that is the monastic discipline, in which every single rule was laid down by the Buddha himself to create the optimum conditions for the monks to practice and to realize Nibbana. But the idea that all you have to do is meditate and everything will be all right is certainly not part of the way the Buddha taught. He says it's very important that you find communities and ways of living that are not undermining your development of Dhamma, and as far as possible are supporting it. Okay, so that's just about inner and outer. The thing that the Buddha did point to a belief in an external entity, a supernatural entity, God, gods, or whatever, is conditioned by a belief in self, in atta. And the extent to which you let go, you see through the falsity of this sense of self, is the extent to which you lose your confidence in something out there. And this reaches its apogee in stream entry, in which the first level of enlightenment, in which the person who reaches that level can it's not possible for them to ever change and to sort of give up being a Buddhist and taking it, because they've seen for themselves now how this sense of someone in here looking to something outside of themselves is a conditioned phenomenon. Okay. As regards the bowing and these various practices, I think that over a course of hundreds of years and thousands of years, there's this realization that the heart needs food and nourishment also, that the path of Dhamma practice is one in which you have to recognize and to respond to emotional needs of the heart. I mean, especially modern day, for most of us who are coming to Buddhism from a non-Buddhist background, I think initially it's just so intellectually satisfying. It's just so, for me, it's just so wonderful. Something that's just every way is just like so brilliant. And to be captivated by the intellectual integrity and brilliance of it, that it can be too much up in your head, and you need to balance that with these devotional practices. So it's a form of emotional development which must go in tandem with sort of intellectual development and meditational development. So I think that bowing to the Buddha is this recognition of the highest goals in our life as a Buddhist, is the enlightenment and the qualities of wisdom, compassion and purity which were most perfectly embodied in the Buddha himself. So bowing to the Buddha, to my understanding, means you're prostrating, and then just that sense of prostration, there's something very special that happens. It's that feeling when your forehead touches. There's something that happens, and for me that's you're prostrating before wisdom, compassion, and purity. You're saying, me is not very wise, not very compassionate, not very pure. I prostrate before wisdom, compassion, and purity. And then, when you realize that the only way that you're ever going to develop that is through following the teachings of the Buddha, the Dhamma, then there's that same prostration. This is the vessel. This is what has taken all these beings in the past and will take me in the future to that state of enlightenment. Then bowing to that, and then the Sangha is all the enlightened beings over the centuries who've practiced this teaching, realized it for themselves, and transmitted it down to the present day, and have proved through their own experience. All the great men and women through all the different countries have shown this is not something that was possible, or maybe possible 2,000 years ago, but it's possible for everyone. Men, women from all different countries, backgrounds, social classes, that they proved that themselves, and to see that the Dhamma embodied in a particular human being is just a wonderful thing. And so it's bowing to all those great beings who'd made sure that we're able to practice the Dhamma ourselves and give us that confidence that it's possible. So this is understand, and for me that can bring up a lot of joy. When I was first among my teacher, Ajahn said he praised me. He said, "You bow very nicely, but if you really knew how to bow, you'd have tears in your eyes," he said. I found this more and more. I go. You can travel for hundreds of miles to see some great teacher, and to tell you the truth, I've heard so many Dhamma talks over the years. It's not the main thing. I could go 500 miles and bow to one of these teachers and come straight back and don't think I wasted my time. It's just a wonderful thing. But as a general form, say as you've done today, then it's more the teacher, as a representative of those things, and representative of the Buddha and the Dhamma and the Sangha. So to maybe a very poor vessel and not sort of a great representative, but in my own small way, being representing someone who's given their whole life to these three ideals, and to developing them and to sharing them with others. So I think all these kind of ceremonies that as Buddhists, and whereas funeral ceremonies, they're kind of like, the ceremony itself is more like the vessel. It's more like what each person brings to them. You can go through all these things and just bow like it's just kind of, like perfunctory way you see people bowing. It's just like sort of because you're expected to, or because you just do it as a sort of physical exercise, bobbing up and down. But it can be much more than that. And as I say, I think if you like in the States, you probably know that in the Vipassana centers and communities, I think many of them found after 10, 20 years of being based on this idea, we're just taking the essence of the Dhamma, stripping it of all the extraneous cultural forms from Asia. We don't want Buddha images, we don't have to do all these sort of ceremonies and stuff. We'll just have the pure Vipassana technique. And then they found after a while it's kind of pretty dry. It's kind of like something that's not really, it's not really kind of fulfilling with people's real emotional needs. And so I think that there is a real place for wise, skillful use of ceremony and ritual. And I think you can see Tibetans are very good at that. But and I must say, like in the Christian, the Catholics have always been brilliant. Like that multimedia, the stained glass windows and the censer and the incense and everything. I think that's really brilliant. It's very.
this is related to what you've just said, and that is this is something that I've thought about for quite a long time. The word gratitude. I feel that when I bow down and put my head below my heart, because most of the time my head is above my heart, that is a sign for me of gratitude, and I think that's cultural too. In Thailand, when we're very, very grateful, then we really go down. But what about the word gratitude itself? Now, in Thai we say, I think, Ru Kun, which means that you are grateful to someone. But can you just be grateful? You know, like that I'm not ill or that my children are fine. There's this sense of gratitude, which I don't know what the equivalent is in Buddhism.
Well, the words that the Buddha used and which have found their way into Thai culture is, like Gatanyu and Gataveti. So they're a little bit slightly different from gratitude. And Gatanyu means that recognition of all that we've been given. And then Gatanyu is the virtue that follows on from that and is the proof of the Gatanyu, if you like, and that's the wish and the intention to give something back and to express that. So there's it's more like a sense of the reason for gratitude and the expression of gratitude. It's a slightly different concept. So we're taught as Buddhists to reflect on all the things that our parents have done for us and our teachers have done for us, and so on. And then the more that we reflect on that and see that clearly, then the more that wish to express that appreciation for that arises, I think. But you're saying you're expressing gratitude for being in good health or having a happy family life and so on. Then I'm not sure that I would refer that to that as gratitude. I think again, like sort of in a Christian culture, there's a sense this is a blessing from God, and it's a blessing, so you're grateful to God. But in Buddhism, we would say like you're healthy, so you're aware of that it feels good to feel healthy. You know who you're going to be grateful to. I mean, you'd be grateful to yourself for eating the right things and taking exercise regularly and being intelligent about your body. But I wouldn't call that gratitude in the same way. It's just appreciation. It's good to feel healthy. But then the Buddha would say, well, also to remember that that's an impermanent state and it's not going to last. So that there's that kind of aspect to it as well. I think that that teaching of Gatanyu and like Ru Kun is so important. And I think like studying science. I think when you say if there weren't worms, if there weren't worms eating the soil, then we wouldn't have soil and we wouldn't be able to grow. We'd all die. If there were no earthworms, we'd all die. Just the smallest, most insignificant creature. I mean, how many people feel grateful to earthworms? But I mean, as I say, we'd all be dead without earthworms, and there must be many other creatures similar. I think talking about like Bun Kun, our parents, is so easy in Thailand and so difficult in the West. There's so much resistance to talking about that to people in the West. But you think. I mean, I've known the most foolish person I can think of is someone who refers to himself as a self-made man. I did it all myself. I didn't rely on anybody else. Oh yeah. Well, I mean, if you didn't have your parents, you wouldn't have lived this long. If your parents had rejected you when you were born and sort of threw you in the dustbin, that would have been the end of it. Okay, you're really smart, but would you be so smart if you hadn't had the education you had? You've read books for yourself, but someone else wrote those books for you. And how could you read the books if you didn't know the language in which the books were read? And how would you know the language if your mum and dad hadn't taught you? So I can't see of anything, that anyone could look at itself and said, "This is me. I did this." Nobody else. It was me. And I'm proud of the fact. That for me is the height of delusion. Yeah. Sorry, there's somebody at the front.
You've been touching on this whole God thing, and I find it very interesting to hear. About 10 years ago, I started a quest on my own personal spirituality, and I was born into a Christian faith family, and so I have all of the, I don't know how to put it, all of the tribal thoughts that were put into my head through that. But approximately 10 years ago, I needed to find what self was for me and my own spirituality. And I never studied a lot of theology, but I have spoken to many people like you, priests, different people, and now we're finding out that there are some very interesting interpretations that we didn't know about years ago about the Bible and how it was written. And now what is boiling down to in my head after I start hearing all these things and I start seeing some of these things visually on television and other places about the Dead Sea Scrolls, for instance, and the Gnostics, and the books that were not put into the Bible and the reasons why, and it really makes me question. But all of a sudden I start realizing that there really were a few very major players with the message, Buddha being one of them, Gandhi, Muhammad, Jesus, Moses for some. And what I'm, in doing some research and some studying on these people, they, to me, personally anyway, the way I read it about what we know today about their original teachings, they were all pretty much the same. They all pretty much said the same thing, if you take the God thing away. But what I find very interesting, all the rest of them, except for Buddhism, there has been so many issues around, I want this piece of property, or I want that rock, or I want to go to war for Christianity because Jesus is going to save your life and I'm going to carry the cross and you're going to believe in me. And I think this is why I'm drawn so much today now into the Buddhism philosophy and the thinking and the teachings, because it's out of all of these different messengers and all these different faiths, it seems to have stayed pretty much on course without, yes, there are different interpretations like you mentioned earlier in your talk, but it's still pretty much the same message for thousands and thousands of years without getting messed up with politics and money and whatever. I mean, you can just add all sorts of things. So I'm just curious about what you would have to say about them.
Yeah, I mean, you've probably studied all these things a lot more than me, so I mean, I haven't gone into all this myself. I think that my position is always to remember we don't know. I think that's the very best possible attitude. I mean, do all the religions lead to the same place? Are they all really teaching the same thing or not? I don't know. I don't think we have to know, really, because I don't think that tolerance has to depend on us all really saying the same thing in different ways, therefore we can love each other. That we should be able to love each other anyway, even if we're all saying completely different things. My critique would be really that belief systems are inherently unsatisfactory. Because and inherently or inevitably lead to conflicts and all this kinds of things. It's in the very structure of them. Because if you if you believe that that faith is the key virtue, you have to believe in this, you have to believe in Jesus before you can go to heaven, then you're always going to have this problem. Well, what's your attitude to people who don't believe in Jesus? And from there the whole thing goes. Or you have to be a Muslim, or you have to live in this and that way. And so it's not that it's not rejecting this religion or that religion, but I just think all belief systems are essentially inevitably going to lead to problems. And what particularly attracts me to Buddhism is it's not a belief system in that way. It says if you can take on certain beliefs as working hypotheses, then it'd be very helpful to you. But those beliefs constantly have to be re-examined and put to the test of experience, and never take the intensity or certainty of your faith as a proof that what you believe in is really true. And that seems to be radically different from the way that belief systems teach people. So that's really what the difference that I see. What I think is possibly a encouraging sign is that within the traditions like Islam and Christianity, there is this huge spectrum of beliefs and attitudes, and that there are new interpretations, whether they are actually the real interpretation, or whether it's just one way of looking at it, and there are probably many Christians who would reject those. But the fact that there are these more sort of universal and open kinds of interpretations within the boundaries of those religions, I think is some kind of hope for the future. Of course, when you think 20, 30 years ago, with the globalization, everybody was saying like religious orthodoxy and fundamentalism are going to go, just going to wither away naturally, and we're all going to be sort of one world, international community. But in fact, what's happened is the other thing is exactly the opposite's happened. That the pace of change is so rapid, and it's just so undermined communities and cultures that people just want to hold on to something, anything, that doesn't change. And so, as you know, fundamentalism has, whether it's a Christian, Islam, Hindu, is stronger than it's ever been. But I think as long as there are legitimate, accepted interpretations of their religions, which they're still available for people, there's still some hope in the future.
In the Pali Canon, there's not only the Vinaya, and when we're practicing as lay people, we might practice meditation. There's many things we can do. We can take the precepts. We might like to read the sutra as well. And I have a lay friend who is insistent that the only thing that can help us is the Vinaya. And I've always said, since we're not monastics, maybe there's some things in there. But he's insistent that the Vinaya provides us all we need to know in order to practice. And I said that it's not a thing of being right or wrong, but I'm just interested. I don't quite understand where this insistence on the Vinaya comes, because there are specific instructions for householders, and there are many ways, as you say, we can develop in our daily life other things. I just wanted to know, in your experience as a monk but teaching lay people, how applicable is a lot of it to lay life for practicing?
It's not applicable. Huge swathes of it are completely inapplicable. That's the most eccentric and interesting statement from a layman I've heard for a long time. Yeah. No, I mean it's quite clear. I mean, you have rather than this kind of a caste, or a sort of an elite group, a hereditary priestly caste of monks, who really know what it's all about. We have this idea of a fourfold assembly of laymen, laywomen, monks and nuns. And the idea that the monastic order represents like a next level of commitment. Okay, so it means that you're giving up the responsibilities and the pleasures and the interests of the layperson to devote yourself wholeheartedly, day and night, to development and study and practice and propagation of Buddhism. And the monastic order and the monastic discipline or vinaya was established to create conditions which would be most conducive for that. So, given the fact that you're going to have people from many different social strata. Remember, at the time of Buddha, there would be Brahmins and Gasats and people from all. So, something that would enable these people from all these different backgrounds to be able to live together in harmony. People of very different personalities. It's a way of just creating harmony in a group of spiritual seekers and a sense of community and brotherhood and so on. So the Vinaya in some parts is particularly to create this kind of orderly and harmonious environment for practice. And then there are many other rules which are specifically aimed at developing mindfulness or to encourage certain virtues to develop. But these are things which, many of these rules have nothing to do with conventional morality, and they're not at all essential. For instance, like if we have all this apart from Vinaya, like my bag. You see, if I put my bag, now I'll always put it like that. It has to be folded like that. If I was to put it like that would be really hopeless. Okay, so I don't think this is something that's going to make a big difference to, say, your life or a friend. Like every time you put your handbag down, you have to fold it over like this. But for me, it's a point of mindfulness. And you have all these rules because we don't have many possessions. Like this robe, the jiwon, and then there's the sabong, the skirt, and then the one that goes over your shoulder. The two. Those are your three main robes, and you have your bag and your sitting cloth and your belt and a few other things. But there are all kinds of rules regarding how you relate to them. So over a period of time, you just have a sense of respect and mindfulness around them. For instance, the three main robes, this one and the other one, always have to be within arm's length at dawn. So wherever I am, you have to have that in your mind. Where are my robes? Where are my bowl? They have to be within arm's length at dawn. So if you're traveling or on a plane or somewhere, you always have to be calculating when's dawn, so that you're always with your thing. So these are examples of rules which don't apply. And then of course all the rules to support the monk's celibacy. I was saying, what is it? Does that mean your friend doesn't talk to a lady alone, or is he? Yes. Oh, well, that's pretty. So I don't. See, there is such a thing as what we call gihi vinaya. Gihi vinaya means lay vinaya. So when people usually think of lay people's sila, you think of the 5 precepts, but there are a number of other things involved. Things like the abhaya mukha. This means refraining from gambling and all kinds of drinking, and I can't remember all the other. Sort of really taking things that are not necessarily covered by the 5 precepts, but are obviously not very wise things to do. And then there are sort of positive things to be doing acts of service towards community you live in, social service, helping other people, all kinds of things that are expected of lay people. But over the course of time, for some reason, that the whole idea of lay sila has just kind of become shrunk down to these 5 precepts. I don't know whether because monks, it's just too much to teach and they just want something sort of just very simple and straightforward, the 5 precepts. But in fact, it's a lot more than that. But I think that the principle to hold is to be seeking to act and speak in ways and to create conditions in which you live which don't encourage defilement and do encourage the virtue and kusala dhammas to arise. So, for instance, if you're as far as speech and watching TV and entertainments and computers and all these kinds of things, there are no hard and fast rules for these things, but you have a criteria of how can I relate to those things in the terms that it's something that contributes to the quality of life rather than detracts from it. Even for the monks, there are a huge number of things these days which obviously didn't exist in the time of the Buddha, and so you can't just depend on the rules that were laid down, even though there are hundreds of them. And for this reason, the Buddha laid down what's called the 4 great standards, which in essence are when you meet some kind of new development, a new challenge. Does it agree with the things that the Buddha forbid or agree with the things that the Buddha allowed? And so this will depend on, monastic communities making decisions, or in Thailand sometimes the Mahathera Samakom, the ruling junta of the Sangha, will decide. For instance, can a monk drive a car? There's no cars in the time of the Buddha. So how do you decide? Well, you look at all the possible occasions when things like sort of related to transport are involved. Certainly monks are not allowed to shouldn't ride horseback or be using any kind of transport which is creating pain or discomfort for animals. But if you're driving a car yourself, well, how does that... Well, one thing, it'd be very hard to drive a car without using money. So if you don't use money, which is clearly prohibited, then that more or less takes cars out of the equation anyway. But also the possibility of you having an accident and knocking somebody over, well, I think would be sufficient cause to say that it's not worth taking that risk and you shouldn't do that. But many monks do, particularly overseas in the States. Many monks drive cars because they, rather than taking that principle, they take the other principle that a monk should be easy to look after and not a burden on lay people. So the monks were saying, well, living in the States, we don't have that kind of lay support that you have in Thailand. And if I'm living, out in the suburbs somewhere, I want to go, and I want to go somewhere, and I have to phone somebody up and say, will you come pick me up and take me here and take me there? It's too much of a burden on the lay supporters, and it's much easier if I just look after myself. So those monks will feel in their particular situation that they're practicing following that particular standard of not creating problems for lay people, whereas in Thailand a different standard. So it's quite ambiguous, even for monks, you see. So yeah, I don't quite understand that about the Vinaya, So,
Actually, I've never met this person. It's a community discussing.
On the internet. Oh, okay. Well, you never know. So you don't actually know that it's a Buddhist layman. It could actually be some kind of imam from Abu Dhabi or something.
But he was very insistent on living the whole time.
No, I don't. No, it's for monastic life.
It's about Sila and the 5 precepts. For the first one, I've been trying to give up eating meat and fish, and I find giving up eating fish quite difficult, and sometimes it's a bit of a struggle, so I don't know if you have any help with this.
Well, because you like fish, or like, you mean physically you feel doesn't agree with you to eat vegetarian food?
Certain kind of fish, I still feel it brings me something I need in my body, more than just the taste.
That seems all right to me. For monks, we're beggars, so the idea is, we don't have a lot of. This is one case in which you don't have a lot of choice, and that if monks are too strict in vegetarianism, then I found myself that living in countryside or living in communities of people who are meat eaters, then often people don't want to come to the monastery because they don't feel they have anything to offer and they feel embarrassed, and so that this is one reason why monks are not compelled to be vegetarian, although many monks may choose privately to be vegetarian, but it's not like expected of monks, except in the case where they suspect that animals have been killed specifically to feed them. In that case, they shouldn't take the food. But for lay people, again, here this is where like modern ways of thinking and quite rational ways of thinking do clash a little bit with it. The Buddha is very, very clear that if you buy meat or fish in a supermarket or in a shop, then that meat or fish wasn't prepared, the animal or fish wasn't killed at your wish, unless you go into one of these restaurants and say, I'll have one of those, and that definitely is bad karma. But it's not bad karma. It's not karmically significant whether or not you eat meat or fish. But the argument, well, yes, if you didn't eat it, then they wouldn't kill it. Well, yes, maybe. But these days, with modern economics, if people started eating less chickens, they probably export more. So it's not so straightforward as that. But I think that sense of not wanting to be part of that whole cruelty and to feel that you don't have anything to do with that, I think that's quite a good and noble feeling. But it's not. As I say, a matter of karma. I don't believe, and I certainly believe that if eating meat and fish was naturally bad karma, the Buddha certainly would have told us, because he told us, everything about, what's karmically significant in life. So I don't think that you need to feel guilty if you. I mean, when I was first at Wat Pah Pong, there was like 100 monks and novices, and I was the 100th one, and we worked very hard, like say getting up 3 o'clock in the morning, eat one meal a day, and if you're at the 100th, you get a sticky rice and then just maybe a couple of fish and a banana or something, and there's a bit of curry. But if you're vegetarian, then I found I got really run down, and so I started to eat fish. And although I'd been through periods of vegetarianism, so I prefer it really. Generally speaking, I've eaten fish because it means that if people who are meat eaters and they come to want to offer food, then they can offer a fish dish. So that's for me as a monk. But I found that physically speaking, fish every now and again feels good for my health. But on the other hand, I don't think that anything terrible would happen if I didn't eat fish. Certainly, as lay people these days, living in a city, the access to huge variety of foods and also very good information, nutritional information about what your body does need is there. So I think that you can make choices about diet that people in the old days couldn't. You just didn't have you couldn't just walk into a shop and say, well, shall I have Indian food or Japanese food or Chinese food or English, well maybe not so much English food, but it's whatever. So I think it's a matter of, you make a decision and you stick to it really, and sometimes with changes in diet it does bring up a lot of anxiety and insecurity and maybe very minor physical effects which may not be lasting, make you feel very anxious, and that if you really basically you would like to be vegetarian, then I would say, well, give it a good period of time, 6 months or something, and just see whether there are actually any detrimental effects on your health long term, or whether it's just something that just come up for a while and then disappears. Because if that's the case, then better to stick with it. But I think, as I'm saying, I don't think it's so much a moral issue myself. I mean, I think that vegetarianism is the future, in that, as you probably know, it takes 20 or 30 kilos of grain to get 1 kilo of meat, because there's millions of acres of land being growing corn, growing whatever for animals to eat, so you can eat the animals. And given the fact that the human population is rising all the time and pressure on food resources is going to increase, it seems to me that it would make more sense to switch more and more to vegetarian foods and to reduce the amount of meat eaten as much as possible. Well, time for one more question. No more questions? Okay.